Today's sponsor of the SHI podcast is Carter Young. For those of you who may not know about Carter Young, which I can only assume you are brand new to student housing or you've been living under a dorm for the past 20 years, Carter Young is a debt recovery firm based in Georgia who has been specializing in debt recovery related to college students for over 2 decades. They even operate their call center out of Athens, Georgia, because they wanted to employ people who understand the student journey in order to give them a better chance of collecting from your student residents who end up owing you a balance after they move out. They also provide training programs to your on-site staff and review your operating methods to make sure everything is being done to prevent bad debt from happening. Now, how many debt recovery services do that? If you're not using Carter Young, I can guarantee you are leaving money on the table. Visit them at carter-young.com or follow the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we are putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees, and joining me today as co-host is one of the most caring people in the world, Greta Dare.
Oh my God.
Welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast, Greta.
Oh, I feel like every single time, like you introduce me in some, like I'm never ready. I'm never ready.
Well, it's really just been on my mind lately because there's just been things just kind of been a whirlwind around me for ever since the beginning of the year, and you know I think about the the two people who have just been this past year have just really consistently been there for me professionally and my family and everything. And you are certainly one of those people at the top of that list. And I wanted to just surprise you really quick and thank you for being one of the most caring people, at least in my world.
Literally still wildly uncomfortable. So you're welcome.
Well, hey, you have been on a hiatus from this podcast for a while. And for audience members who don't know, Greta went back to college and she has just been flying through her classes and have been getting amazing grades. I'm assuming you got a 4.0 again last semester from what I remember.
I did do that. Yes.
So
I'm just going to keep being uncomfortable. We're going to keep with this train. I like it. It's good. It's good.
Well,
I know
that I know that. Sorry to make you uncomfortable. I know we've had to be on the receiving side of the sacrifices that you've had to make in order.
Something had to go. Yes.
Yeah, but and the audience has missed you every time. You know, on all these events that we go to, everybody's asking me, "So where's Greta?" Or where's Greta been on the podcast? I haven't heard from her. So.
Where's her annoying voice and her never-ending screeching laugh? Where is the human that makes fun of you for literally all the things?
Well,
I know, right? How do you stay humble without me?
Oh, it's listen, you know, we make it through, Greta. We do. But no, I mean, it's seriously between both yourself and Kristen Hahn, who's our director of marketing. It is both of you guys are just some of the most caring people in the world. And, I can tell you without a doubt, this past year, it would have been very tough getting through a lot of the things that we were able to do here at SHI if it wasn't for both of you guys. And so anyway, just wanted to say thank you for that.
Well, thanks. You're welcome. Thanks. Thank you. All right.
So we are back today with another one of these live recording things that we've been doing. We did one.
I love this one too. I love this one.
We did one at IMN conference out in California back at the beginning of the year. Love doing that one. Had Matt Maxa from CA Ventures and Jerry Wojcinski from Varsity. And we also had from Scion Group, we had Mitchell Smith, and was just loved what we were able to get out of that in relationship to, what everybody's thinking about for 2020. And coming away from that, there was another conference that was coming up that was on our radar, but we decided, look, we've just got a lot that's going on. Timing's not the best. So this conference was going on in New Orleans. I'm not going to mention it specifically because we don't do any cross promotion, but it's an industry event that we've talked about, before on the podcast, and I just wasn't going to be able to make it. And I had one of the sponsors reach out and say, "Hey, are you going to do something for this event? We, really got a lot out of the last one." And I said, "No, I think that's going to be tough." They asked again, and we had somebody else ask, and I said, "Okay, let's see if we can put something together." And bless Kristen's heart, but she was able to. We were able to figure something out. We weren't going to be able to go to the conference because it was going to be a drive down, drive back type of thing, but we could do something for one of the evenings of the conference. And she was able, literally within a week, to put together just a fantastic event at a fantastic venue. And we really, really enjoyed the dinner, really enjoyed the folks that came out to see us. Thank you so much to those who mentioned to me, who either saw me in the neighborhood of where this conference was happening or at the venue that we had, that, told us how much they appreciate what we're doing at Student Housing Insight. You guys just don't understand how much that means to us, and really gives us a lot of purpose behind what we're doing. So thanks for all the kind words that people said about that. But yeah, we were able to put something together, and we said, okay, live podcast topics, what are we going to do? And two of my favorite people and two of my favorite companies, Eddie Moreno with Cardinal Group, and then also Brad Hastings with Walk to Campus, which probably a lot of our audience doesn't know anything about Walk to Campus. I'll kind of give a setup here in a little bit, but they've got a national footprint, but and they're only in 9 markets and only have about 3,000 beds, but they're just doing some incredible stuff. I'll talk more about them in just a second. But as we were looking at who was going to be attending and who was going to be present down in New Orleans, we said, these two groups actually make a lot of sense. These two guys and what, their careers have been about. This kind of makes perfect sense, because a lot of the folks that are attending there were non-top 25 student housing companies. They either have a regional footprint or just a single market footprint. And, because of that, they don't have a lot of the same training that the bigger, top 25, certainly the top 10 companies put in place, and a lot of the other resources. So they get really scrappy when it comes to, to soaking up information and content. And I think their entire trip, having Student Housing Insight there to do this event, really enhanced that entire experience. So, wow, that was a lot that I just finished saying.
I know. I was sitting there and I was like, okay, yes, absolutely, okay. But no, in response to at least a portion of that was, I completely agree. I think that the combination of these two people was kind of the perfect pair for this particular subject, because I think that in a lot of instances, we find that on panels, especially at a lot of the conferences, for a large portion of our industry, not all of the information is applicable. It's not all something that you can just take back, you can implement, or that you can utilize. And I think that the great thing, and this is something that I was thinking about while I was sitting there listening, is that it's not, it is partially that Walk to Campus is their size. And then also Cardinal, I mean, it was right when I got started into student housing is apparently when Eddie started with Cardinal, but their size that they were, and then their growth as they went forward. So everything that they speak to, everything that they experience, everything that they know is completely applicable to all of these companies. And I love that. So it's a lot of great information and a great pair, I think.
Yeah, they've both been on even at varying speeds. They've had nothing but growth over the past decade, and I think it's something that when you're looking at a company that year after year consistently is getting bigger and is getting better, it's a good time to sit back and listen to it. And you have to be really careful with that in this industry, because, we've certainly seen, in the past decade, a lot of companies that came onto the scene, had a lot of growth, in a very short amount of time. And those companies aren't even around to talk about today. Mm-hmm. So, seeing these two companies who have got started 15, 16 years ago and are still here and building something that's pretty incredible, I think that says a lot. So let me give everybody the setup. Regardless if you work with large purpose-built student housing communities or a portfolio of single-family homes that are next to universities. Greta, one that comes to my mind immediately, and you and I were talking a little bit about it. Things like, Morgantown, West Virginia, where there was, the first three or four kind of blocks right around that university is, single-family homes that are second, third, fourth generation. They've just kind of been handed down. Who knows if they've ever been turned. And there's a lot of that's throughout this industry that, we typically call the shadow market. But
Syracuse is like that. Oxford, Ohio is like that. There's a lot of markets where the single family homes are the market.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're going to walk away from this episode hearing, and having a better understanding of what it really takes to grow a portfolio from one single family home, because both of these companies, that's what they did. Their first investment was a single family home. And both of these companies are now managing national portfolios, as I mentioned. Eddie's perspective is more from the mid to large purpose-built assets with, a combination of owned properties as well as third-party owners. Brad's perspective is more of a, boutique scattered sites business model that's combining single-family homes with small and mid-sized purpose-built communities, which is all owner managed. There's no third party in what they're currently doing.
Which I'm so here for. I really am.
So both of these guests really have a passion for serving students and have built scalable business models by creating well thought out, let's call it operating practices. Mm-hmm. I think also great company culture. And as you and I have talked about as we were getting ready for this, they both have pretty unique approaches to their management technology as well. So with all that being said, let me go ahead and push play on this. Again, this is Eddie Moreno from Cardinal Group Management, as well as Brad Hastings from Walton Campus Properties. So guys, let me preface this a little bit. In looking and thinking about what's been going on in student housing over the past 2 decades since I've been involved, and both of these guys to my left and right have been involved the past 2 decades as well. There's a kind of a difference that I see happening, or that has always been there, but now that student housing has become something a little bit more mainstream and very accepted, especially from the investment world, and what we see with PBSH, there's kind of this original part of student housing that I think a lot of us originally came from, that is more of the boutique, scattered sites, that type of business that is still out there and is very prevalent. And Brad from Walton Campus, and I'll let him tell you a little bit about what his company has done, but they've kind of worked on from that standpoint. Then on the other side, Eddie, who's been involved with PBSH throughout his career, is more mid to large size companies. And so I really wanted to get these two guys together to kind of talk about the differences, because they've both been scaling their company and have got some great things that are happening, both from a culture standpoint with their companies, and just the focus that both of these guys and their companies have got on what they're doing, I think is, at least from my observation, and I've known these guys and their companies for several years now, it's very crystal clear, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from it. So that's kind of the setup. Just real quick, by a show of hands, how many people are less than 10,000 bed portfolios that are here? Anybody over 10,000 beds? Thanks. Appreciate that. Everybody that's over 10,000 beds is with Entrada or RealPage tonight. So, Brad, I'm going to start off with you. You're not only the COO, but a co-founder for Walden Campus. Tell us about that entrepreneurial journey that you guys have been, part of the past 15 years or so, and give us kind of a projection on what you guys are moving towards now.
I'm done projecting anything relative to growth, but Walden Campus kind of was born out of another company that myself and our CEO Matt King were involved in back in the late 90s, early 2000, and that was a company that was providing telecom services to off-campus student housing. So you can't believe it, but there was a time where there was not high-speed internet off-campus, and people actually dialed up. I went to school back then. Dinosaurs roamed the land and things like that. And there was a little company in the town that I went to school in that was extending the university network off-campus, wiring up these complexes and providing high-speed internet, phone, and cable. And I went to work for them. That's where I met Matt. He was our investment banker at the time, and became our CFO. That company went and got sold. Neither he nor I particularly wanted to go with that. So he's like, you know what? I'm spending a lot of time talking to owners of off-campus student housing. This is, again, late 90s.
Take some water. If we can always edit.
I'm good. I got a cold and a cough drop. And, one thing we've noticed is that people aren't really paying attention to these tier 2, tier 3 markets. And let's build a company that's sole focus is location, not product, and that is going to go into these schools that no one is really paying attention to. And that brought us to Longwood University in Virginia. And we can't keep Eddie coming to Farmville and building student housing, but we can certainly be inside of them because we can get there first and so on. So that was 15 years ago. That model sort of worked, and we expanded it very organically over the last 15 years, and now have 3,000 beds in 9 different markets.
I think that's kind of the unique thing about it is 3,000 beds over 9 markets. When you're looking at going into a new market, kind of what's the first thing that you're looking for? What does it take to get having you guys plant a flag in a market?
I think that location has to be relevant. There has to be some sort of competitive advantage to being close. I think you lose that in some markets when there really is no pedestrian to campus student housing. People call themselves pedestrian, but you're still on a bus line, or you're not. The people, if you parked your car across the street from that property, are people truly walking to school? Are they biking to school, or are they walking out their door and going to the bus stop? And once that happens, you sort of, to a certain extent, lose a little bit of that advantage, relative to location. So. That would be primarily one of the things I would think about. There has to be certain, growth trajectory of the school and, some other factors that you think about. But, that, for instance, sort of comes to mind as being the first thing.
So, Eddie, we had Cardinals CEO Del DeWitt on the podcast, I guess probably a year and a half ago at this point. He did a great job of describing how those 4 or 5 founders of the original company came together and put their money together to buy their first. It was a house. The first asset that they actually purchased, and you came in a little bit after that as they obviously started to grow. And we've had you on the podcast as well discussing kind of your own journey in our site level to C-suite. We'll link both of those episodes below so that people can go back and take a look at that. But take us back to when you joined Cardinal, and besides the growth of the portfolio, tell us how you've seen that portfolio evolve.
Yeah, sure. So just for a little bit of a background, when I first joined Cardinal is 2013, call it May, June 2013. At that time, the portfolio was primarily an owned asset portfolio. It was a couple of conventional communities, call it 300-400 units, and about 2,500 student beds. The 4 founding principals really knew that they had a couple things. One, they had an operating platform at the beginning of it that was something special that they wanted to expand to the market and offer the services that they thought were unique to our operating platform at that point and take it more broadly. Secondly, they knew that they weren't always going to be net buyers. And so as those of you in the management game know, it takes a pretty substantial portfolio to be able to support a management platform and management team. And so that's really where my journey started with Cardinal. I joined the company in 2013. At the same time, we started our third-party business. And since then, we've grown to 60,000 beds. We're now the number 2 privately held third-party operator, number 5 overall. So from a size perspective, obviously that's been a pretty significant growth. But I would say the profile of client that we've had has changed dramatically. In those early years in the third-party space, we were doing a lot of one-off JV ownership style structures. Then we started working with a lot of private equity shops, a lot of the names that people in this room are familiar with. And then started working with more institutional clients, some international clients, also raised our own opportunistic student housing fund and started buying assets ourselves. So the profile and of not only the assets, but the clients have changed tremendously. As we've grown and scaled, our value proposition to the market has changed dramatically. I think back in the early days when I started, we were known as really kitschy marketers, and we were really like creative marketing folks, and that's what we were getting hired for. And then somewhere along the way, we became a strategic partner in that we, as a company, like to fancy ourselves as really good at blocking and tackling, doing the right things right. And I think generally the mix of those things have carried us through a lot of our growth over the last several years. And those are some of the ways that our portfolio has changed our client profile and our value proposition to the market.
Gotcha. So I want to get into a little bit more of the specifics with what you guys are doing as companies to scale and lead towards a lot of growth. Let's talk about technology for a second, because both of you guys have done some incredible things from a technology side from the beginning, really. Brad, you guys have actually done something very unique, which is you created your own property management system. I want to ask, a lot of times I get asked, what's the best property management system out there? As a consultant, kind of what's my input on that? And my response is I can't walk the campus into selling their software. And then, I go into the ones that actually, do box it up and sell it. So as you saw the hands earlier, we've got a lot of folks that are smaller in size, and they've probably considered that at some point in time. But from your perspective, now that it's 15, 16 years later, what kind of advice would you give, or would you tell people to stay away from it?
Yeah, if I had to give advice to the Brad of 2004, I would tell him to build his own software.
Yeah,
we kind of had to. Back then, Entrada wasn't around. I think it was Yardi, RealPage. They wouldn't even sell it to us because, again, we were buying houses.
Yeah.
And the way they licensed it, it was just not economically viable to use their product. So we had to build our own. And my background was in computer science, so I basically just kind of got to work and built the first version of it. And we just added development resources over the years, and have continued to add features and functionality to it to really, to what we want. The great thing about it is that, my staff can come and say, hey, it would be really great if we can do this. And I don't have to put in a feature request with any of those big box companies. We just do it if it makes sense, and there's consensus that it makes sense. So it's been nice. It keeps us nimble. We don't have to, we don't have to operate our business the way Entrada or anybody thinks that we should. We can operate our business the way we think we should and build the software to support it. And I think that has in itself has created a little bit of a competitive advantage potentially.
Yeah. Eddie, with you guys, I know, with all transparency, I do asset management as well, and two of the properties that I do asset management for, Cardinal is the third-party manager on that, and I know you guys rolled out a huge investment into your business analytics reporting and everything that goes into that. Tell us a little bit about that process, and would you recommend it again? I don't think you've really got a choice, but what are some things you would warn people, going through that process?
Yeah, I would say you hear this all the time that whether it's a software or a data platform or a new reporting suite or a new workflow, if you don't have organizational buy-in top to bottom in a very three-dimensional way, you're going to fail at whatever that release is, right? And so over the years, we've tried to get very objective about that process. We've tried to take emotion, we've tried to take personality, we've tried to take ego and title and all of those things that come along with making big decisions out of the process. And so that would be one of my big recommendations to folks is first, know what you want to achieve with whatever platform it is that you're trying to implement. Understand the organizational behavior changes, the performance results, the competitive differentiation, whatever it is that you are trying to effectuate with that investment, understand what that is and stay true to that. And by staying true to that, I mean implement a process, a selection process that involves people up and down the organization, that is objective in that it has scoring to it, that it's comparable to where you're actually vetting the market. And by utilizing that process, you'll naturally come to the best decision. You'll limit shiny objects that can be distractions to the company. And you'll make sure that you understand what it really takes to actually implement something. Oftentimes, you decide on the implementation cost and your perceived value add, but you don't understand the back-end cost of development and consultation and team member support outside of your existing team. And those are the real investments that you have to commit yourself to in order to actually make a platform successful, whether it's business intelligence or an operating system or you name it, whatever it may be.
So one thing going through that process and with the various type of clients that you've got, what was kind of the toughest part of trying to get whatever? Because you've got some institutional type owners along with folks that may only have 3 or 4 different properties, and I'd like to ask you which one had more or more stringent reporting requirements, but I know personally that I think the smaller they are, they probably got more requirements or more desires. But what was I'm just thinking about having to go through that process and trying to put everything together of, okay, here's the list of everything that we need. Anything with that process that you can kind of...
Yeah, I would say that generally speaking, the entire industry is getting more sophisticated, and that quite honestly includes the investment side of the business. The average 2, 3, 4 community owner that does JV one-off communities, they're going to require more of your time, and yes, they're going to require their own style of nuanced questions and reporting requirements or whatever it may be. But so are the big shops, right? And so what we have to do in making those decisions, and quite honestly, getting their buy-in after we've messaged to them, here's what we've decided on implementing. We have to get down to the core things that any owner would want to know. And this is more of a science than an art these days, quite honestly. We're moving a lot more towards the science than we are in art. And our individual companies allow us to kind of implement the artistic side of how we individually operate. But the variables that affect community operations on the leasing side, on the collection side, on bad debt and R&M spend or whatever it may be, we're every single year getting more and more able to dial those things in. And so being able to show our clients that we're thoughtful in what we're able to report to them via a platform and know that we're hitting 80% of what clients will want, and then we can deal with the nuanced requests on the side, is something that we employ as just kind of you can't have paralysis by analysis, or you can't let the perfect get in the way of the necessary. Sometimes you have to be able to message something to your clients and say, yes, we were thoughtful, we're going to hit 80% of everything you need, and then we'll work on the details kind of on the margin. And that allows us to actually move our platform forward without having to get approval from every single client along the way.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the element that really makes all this work, and that's the people and the folks that you guys have on the ground at each of your sites and in those support roles. I've seen both of your companies grow, certainly over the past decade, and have just been really amazed at how you guys have been able to retain folks and grow folks into making this a career. Let's talk a little bit about each of you. What would you attribute that success in talent management to?
I don't know. We know. We actually talked about this the other night, and we were sitting as a executive team, whatever, and you're like, why has it been 10 years and we still kind of like each other? Why do we like working with each other? And because I'm not really that great of a person, and neither are you. And but we do. I mean, we're at a point where we're finishing each other's sentences. I mean,
yeah.
It's special, but I don't know what the recipe is. Frankly, it's certainly not to hire people just like you, because that doesn't work. But just have a general respect for one another. Find people, not a whole lot of egos. I don't think there's a lot of room for those in growing organizations. It's a tough one. I don't know if I know the answer.
I would say I think we're known for our culture, but what is that? I think is an interesting question, and I would say that two things come to mind when I'm answering that question. One is engagement, and the other is accountability. And I'll talk about accountability first. Oftentimes when we talk about accountability, we immediately jump to the team members' accountability to the company, which is, are you fulfilling the roles and responsibilities of the job that we are paying you to do every single 2 weeks? And that's all well and good, but when I think of accountability, I also think about the other side of that coin, right? It's two sides of the same river. The other side of it, which isn't talked about often in organizations, is the accountability of the organization to the team member. And more when we talk about millennials or Gen Z and what people in the workforce these days need out of the work that they're doing, we really try to hold ourselves accountable to that. And that'll actually maybe be a segue to the engagement piece. When our VP of People and Culture, Peter Lynch, just sent me a report from Qualtrics that was really a satisfaction survey, but it was judging two things. It was judging retention and engagement. And it was interesting to see that the top three in each of those categories were the same three things effectively. They were worded differently, but trust in leadership, the ability to learn new things and to be developed, and a direct correlation with that person's roles and responsibilities to the strategic objectives of the company. And so we try to, going back to my first point on our accountability to our team members, we try to be very programmatic and disciplined about not only communicating out what our roadmap is and how we came to decisions, or what decisions we came to, but how we came to them. And then, we're running a business, not a democracy at the end of the day, but we really involve our people as subject matter experts and create these project teams that allow for the subject matter experts to lead the conversations versus the titles in the room. And having that level of opportunity, onus, expectation of our team members really solicits engagement. And at the end of the day, we hope allows us to retain the right people for as long as we're lucky to have them.
Great. So let's jump into the operating practices, because I think there's a lot that you guys do that are the same. I think there's a lot that you guys that do that are very different. And I'm going to go about this a little bit differently and ask you what you would change today if it was 100% up to you, and you had the capability of instituting the change overnight. Brad, that's probably a little bit easier.
No, I'm going first. I'm going first.
Well, I was going to say
expense reports. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
It's probably a little bit easier with Brad because everything's 100% owned, and it's easy to make that decision. So, but anyway, thinking about your policy and procedures manuals, there's likely something in there that you think is a complete waste of paper or digital ink. What would you cut out tomorrow?
I mean, these policies and procedure books tend to grow in one direction. That's bigger, right?
Yeah.
Because you come across something in the business, you're like, oh, didn't think we'd have to address that, but I guess we got to write a page about it now because someone did something they weren't supposed to do or acted a way they weren't supposed to act. So that's the thing. I mean, you kind of wish that you didn't have to do some of write these policies, write these procedures that, should just be innate in how people treat each other and operate on a day-to-day basis in a business world. So that's the stuff. I mean, you just kind of, there's certain things that, you just wish you didn't have to address because it would just be innate in people, but unfortunately it's not, and you do.
In preparing for this, actually had our training team pull the SOPs that were utilized the least, and quite honestly, I'm glad some of them were utilized the least. They were about emergencies and deaths of a resident and escalation policies and things like that. And as I was thinking through that, I was thinking they're there for a reason, and they're there when you need them. So looking at that in that way is not the right way to look at it. But in thinking about that, I thought, well, we do have SOPs and things that are not utilized because of the fact that they were 1 or 2 iterations ago. Mm-hmm. When I'll use an example. When we wrote our commission submission policy, it was when we were 500 team members. Now we're 1,500. That requires a completely different platform to be able to do that effectively and not waste people's time, and most importantly, get it right. And so things like that are things that we have identified that are SOP related and platform related, systems related, that we're actively pursuing in a list of just open projects that we need to chew away at.
Gotcha. So when you think about the current process a prospect goes through to lease at one of your properties, where do you see the most inefficiency, and how would you think it can be changed?
I mean, for us, again, being scattered site house folks for 40% of our portfolio, we don't have a model. So touring is a challenge. There's notification of the current residents, making sure the times align with the leads, making sure that you have a in-house resource to be able to meet them out there and do it. We don't, you can't just show up at our office in some of these markets and expect to go see the apartment that you want to rent. Yeah. So that takes a lot of human resource and time, and is a challenge when you're doing the kind of stuff we're doing.
Yeah, I think that we're I would say the entire process, right? The entire leasing process, soup to nuts, is relatively inefficient, at least as you would think of what is the standard in this day and age. And that includes even the fact that you're applying online and you're signing your lease online and those type of things. I think that when we look at the buying habits of the consumers that we're selling to, they're making heavy buying decisions in their personal lives, and obviously their housing is a big one as well. And when we think about that soup to nuts purchasing process, it can range anywhere from 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, depending on the time of year, depending on the demographic. And so one of the things that we're focused on is really compressing that time from somebody becoming an active lead to actually a signed and sealed future resident. And a lot of that has to do with the experience. So we're trying to do things functionally within our systems, within the automation of our workflows to help consolidate that. But then we're also exploring other alternatives like self-guided tours and AI bots that allow you to effectively conversate on a 24-hour basis. And that's the way of the world, right? That's the way it's going. And I think that as more communities are developed and the physical layouts allow for self-guided tours and all of the limited access and things like that they would need, that the autonomy of the actual leasing process will continue to be something that the entire industry, not just student housing, trends towards.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing how that ultimately falls out, because I think obviously the people make a lot. But Brad, you and I have even had discussions on centralizing things and seeing how that ends up playing into, if you've got more experienced people that are in a centralized leasing office, does that have more of an impact on, closing ratios and everything else? So it's going to be interesting to see how that ends up going. So everyone here, raise your hand if you've been on site during a turn, like managing a turn. Great. So I think there's always something that we would like to change during turn or to make turn easier. And thinking of the two different property types that you guys are involved with, I know that turn is very different. So thinking about that, what are one, possibly two items that you're trying to overcome in order to make turn easier and less expensive?
I would say that eliminating transfer tenants would be the one that we would hope to go after. Again, product's very unique. People want to move from one place to the one down the street, but they can't move down until tenant A moves, and tenant B can't move till tenant C moves. And you could get a situation where you got double, triple transfers. Yeah. So we actually have built some logic into our operating system where if you try to assign a lease to a apartment that creates a double or triple transfer, it'll flag it and say, "Don't do that the sanity of our on-site team, please."
Nice. Anything else? That's it.
I would say treat turn as a risk mitigation exercise, in that you kind of have to think about everything that can go wrong, and then anticipate it and try to mitigate that through timely planning, through resources. One thing that we see all the time, and really we put the challenge to our portfolio managers and our community managers who are negotiating the budgets, is the expectation that our on-site facilities teams are going to handle everything. And I mean everything from trash outs to moving all the furniture that's being tossed, to installing and assembling all the furniture that's coming in, to everything else that they have to do. And so what we try to do is articulate, as to whatever degree we need to, all of the components of turn that our teams need to budget for, and then compel our owners to make sure that we're not cutting everything that we need, from overtime to supplies to capital and furniture and whatever it may be, so that we're not having to cut corners that we're going to end up having to pay for later. We see a lot of communities that have a lot of deferred maintenance. We see communities where, the maintenance team is working, 90, 100, 120 hours in a week to facilitate a turn because there was a lack of planning. And as an operator, we see that as one of the two riskiest things that we have to execute every year. The first being filling up the community and protecting top line revenue. The second riskiest thing that we do as a single exercise is the execution of turn. So we take it very, very seriously, and we address it during the business planning process in the fall, and we start really early in the spring to make sure that we're ahead of the game come turn time.
So I'm going to go off the cuff really quick and ask you a question that I didn't prep you for. This year you guys did turn a little bit differently, Brad, with trying to centralize that, and you and I have had some follow-up discussions on that. And since we do have so many folks here that are kind of more scattered site type operators, what did you learn from that?
Sure. So to kind of back up a little bit, historically what we've done is taken our corporate level folks and put them into the market during turn. Taking folks that have been through a bunch of turns, that know a lot about turn, and leverage them into a specific market to assist. Well, we have more markets now than we have people at the corporate office to go in there. So we thought, hey, let's take the knowledge base that we have, the experience with turn, and centralize it and try to leverage it across multiple markets. So we created this concept of CTOP, centralized turn operations, where we handled centrally a lot of the communications, the organization, updating of turn boards, centrally, so that your on-site staff could concentrate on the things that you can't, which is inspect apartments. They're not doing paperwork. They're not doing a lot of texting. They're not attached to their phones as much. They're spending time in the apartments, making sure that they are painted well and cleaned well. And we learned a lot. It went pretty good. I think it was a lot. So it was a lot of information coming into one central
when I ask you this. Yeah. So are you going to do it again that way next year?
We're going to make a couple changes.
Yeah. We took on a little bit too much. It was like drinking from a fire hose. But I think the good thing that came out of that is that it works. Like, you can be a resource remotely during turn. We tried to be too much of a resource during turn, and it was really hard. But with tweaks, I think it'll be better.
Gotcha. Well, guys, I appreciate you taking your time out from being at the conference here in New Orleans to some time here and create some great insight for our not only our attendees here at the live recording, but also for the audience that's listening to it after the fact. So thanks for, I know it's late. Eddie had some crazy flight alterations that have happened over the past 24 hours. So I know both of you guys are extremely tired, but I appreciate you guys sticking it out and helping us with this. I think we've got a lot that we can take away from it. And to everybody that joined us for dinner, thanks so much. And if you would, please give these guys a round of applause.
Thank you, guys.
So there you have it. I know the intro is pretty short because I wanted to get into that and make sure everybody had a chance to listen to it, because I think there's some key takeaways that Greta, you and I have after even though I was there, I've gone back and listened to it, obviously through the editing process, and even hearing it now, once again, it's one of those things that I take something a little different each time away from it. So what are some of the things you took away?
There were things that one, it's so funny. It's not even was like a takeaway. I loved the overall energy that was coming out of the room, which isn't even a part of the actual guest. And I get that, but I had to kind of mention it because I loved that this event was created so huge. Obviously, shout out to Kristen. So I know that was mentioned in your very long rant. But I wanted to bring that up just because I thought it was really great. And I feel like it's kind of palpable. And I think that adds to the overall listen and story of what was going on. But additionally, I mentioned this in the beginning, which was that I love Walk to Campus's setup. There's a couple of things that I really love about what they're doing that is different than what everybody else is doing. And you kind of said one of my favorite terms that I think really, I've said it a million times, I'm going to keep saying it until I die, apparently, which that I think that the biggest place that we as an industry, I think hospitality, I think a lot, multifamily, that a lot of places need to start focusing in on and turning their heads to as my generation, Gen Z's coming up, is this very boutique mentality. And Walk to Campus is focusing on it. They realized that a long time ago. And it really is, it's a thing. And I think that it's a great model, and focusing on these small little areas and really doing it up and doing it well and having great locations, I think is the way to go. And so that was that first one that I was really kind of excited about. And obviously that doesn't in any way take away from my love for Cardinal and everything that they do. It's just, it's two completely different business models, and everything that Cardinal does obviously is incredible as well. So it's just two completely different things, which is one of the things that I absolutely loved about the fact that, like I said, that these two companies were brought together to bring all of this genius kind of at once.
Yeah. I do think a lot of the folks that have been focusing on the type of product that Walk to Campus typically has, especially what they started out with, because they have migrated more to the to the larger properties, because it just takes that. When they got started, it was a different climate. It was before 2008, 2009 and the Great Recession. So buying up these single family homes, was a lot easier then than what it is today. And that's kind of how I first got introduced to these guys, and doing some scouting work to help them find, some other markets to go into, and really kind of looking at, how they could get to, to a new market and immediately have 50 to 100 beds, because that's what it was going to take for it to be worthwhile for them. But I think there's a lot of groups, and we certainly saw it by those that were present at this event, that they were originally focused just on one market, kind of their home market. And, maybe they went to school there, maybe they ended up living there and just ended up having an investment property and just kind of grew it from that standpoint. So I think what Walk to Campus, just having Walk to Campus there, and what Brad was talking about, I think really resonated with a lot of them. And I think that's why it would resonate with a lot of our general podcast audience as well, because, it's not just bootstrapping it's also, you've got to find a lot of answers, because a lot of I know we're going to talk about technology here in just a second. And, that's one thing alone. Like a lot of the big box management software companies that are out there don't even really provide a good solution for, that type of portfolio. And so there's other things that you've got to completely bootstrap from an operations standpoint. And so I think it was good hearing that. What were your thoughts on the fact that Walton Campus has their own property management software and have been developing that?
You and I both know that question is 100% a full setup, because here's the thing. Here, dear audience, let me let you know something. So it wasn't mentioned in the beginning. Now that everybody knows that I'm in school, for those of you that are still here with us for the outro, thanks for hanging around. Welcome to Wes and Greta's After Hours. I'm going to school for software engineering, and a big part of that is Wes knows. So what we're going on.
You got to stop and just let the audience kind of consume that and absorb that and marinate on that.
I don't feel like the audience is going to be surprised by this information at all. This is the same person who's on like the science of marketing, and I'm about data, and where's the technology, and where, like, this is literally, nobody's going to be surprised by this information. I would be shocked if anybody's surprised by this.
To know how well you are, in kind of reading people and understand how to market to people. Because yes, I understand perfectly, because I've worked so close with you that, I know that you're bringing in that data to help you make those decisions. But I think for a lot of people that are listening to this podcast probably don't realize that about yourself. And
well,
yeah, it just takes a minute to think about.
Really just comes from the place of, when I want to know something, I want to know something. It's just really that simple. And I want to know how to make all software. And so the goal is to have full stack developing abilities by the time I'm done. And that means being able to build an app, being able to build software, being able to do front end, back end. It's a whole thing. And that came about.
So Brad, there you go. If you're listening, I know you're going to be listening to this podcast at some point in time. You've got your next developer in the pocket right here.
But that came about. You have to, my whole journey, it all makes sense. It's, coming up from the leasing side and managing facilities teams and managing a property, and then really a lot on the leasing policies, operations, and all of that side. And then, over to marketing and the science of marketing and analytics and all of that. And to me, and so I had, I completely implemented Entrata in, 2 and 3 different instances, was a whole part of that process, and have worked with almost every software that's out there. And, there was a whole entire period of time where I was like, I just want to make the software. And so I had that project going when you and I worked together for how long, where I was like, I'm just going to make it. I'm just going to at least make a portion of it. It's fine. I've got this. It's fine. And it was a whole thing, because I was so frustrated, because everybody wants to be able to meet our needs as best as they can. We all know they unfortunately cannot. And you want something that's intuitive. You want it to make sense. You want it to have a beautiful interface. You want the reports that are going to pull all of the information that we so desperately need. And you want that information to be easy and understandable. You just want this information, and it isn't all there in one product yet. And it's because it hasn't been created for us. None of these products were created for us. And I was just like, well, fine, I'm just going to do it myself. And so when he said that, he was like, no, we just made our own. I was like, oh, he just said those words. I need to meet this man because he did that. And I don't understand why I haven't met you. And I need to see what you created, so that I need all of these things to happen. Thanks. So that's where I was at. That was my takeaway. Those were the things that happened.
Yeah, I have seen it. And when he says there's no ego, I mean, he's exactly right. I mean, he pulled me in to give some advice on how to create the turn board that they ended up developing with inside that software. And because of that, I know it's unlike anything else out there that the other software companies have, say that they've got a turn board, but it's really not built for student housing. And I guess this is a point where I'll probably make an announcement. I should make the announcement of something we've decided to do. I love our sponsors at SHI. We're changing up some things. I said in our 2020 roadmap, I guess is the best way to call it, podcast that, I gave a little background about sponsors and, how we feel about it, how we go through that process of selecting them. And it's really about sharing that mission statement of making student housing better. And I'm not saying that, the other big groups that are out there right now, don't share that mission. But I see a lot of things that I'm very concerned about. And I think putting the SHI stamp on either one of them by having them as a sponsor. Now, don't get me wrong. You can exhibit at our events. There's not a lot of specification as far as exhibiting. And so you could very well see, a real page or a Entrada set up at one of our events, but they're not going to be in a sponsorship situation. Because I've just decided that these platforms are so specific to, what is happening in regards to a business model that I've really accepted kind of what Brad has accepted. And it's easy for me because I've kind of seen how he's evolved it over the past decade and a half. But if anyone was going to ask me what they need to do, that's what they really need to do. They're going to be serious about how they're approaching their company. They need to figure that out, because I don't think any big box group that's out there that all they're focused on is selling more software. I don't know that they're necessarily going to be the best match. I may be completely wrong about that, but that's just...
or everybody can just wait for me to graduate and I will make it and it will be fine. All right. It will be fine.
But there's always going to be something that somebody needs tweaked somewhere. And, look, I've said on these boards for, voting on what enhancements need to be prioritized. And
that's true. Waiting for that kind of stuff to happen is really, really annoying. Actually, there's someone else that I'm working with and they're working with a completely different type of software. And I'm like, oh God, there's always little tiny tweaks that you need, that then you have to make a request for an enhancement. And it's like, no, I understand that not ever, but we do. This is something that we can't possibly be the only one. And it is, I get it. It requires a whole huge process, but damn it, it's important.
Exactly. And
I get it. It's valid.
The other thing is looking at, I know how thin some of these, when you start thinking about, okay, where can we add to the NOI, if we're about to go into a recession, or if this is going to happen in this specific market, and we're going to have 10%, 15% vacancy for the next 2 years, what are we going to do on the expense side to, try to overcome that? And when it comes to being able to write your own ticket, as far as your software platform is concerned, I think that gives you way more control over it than getting something that's out of the box and you're contracted with a bunch of services that you don't even need. And anyway, that's my feeling on it.
Well, and I think that, not to spend too terribly much time on this subject, but I think to a lot of people, it sounds like a really overwhelming, daunting, or, just type of situation where it's like, you don't even know where to begin. It's like, well, do we contact a software development company? Do we, so it's like you pull up the Googles, then you're like, hey, Googles, how do I make the softwares? How do I make this happen? What's the average cost? You just type your question in. You're like, how much is this going to cost? And it's like, well, the average cost to develop a software system is approximately, it's kind of like when we all want to make an app for, because that's the other thing. Hi, can we all get a app, please? Because holy cow, it kills me. But that's the thing. In order to, you can also hire a team of a couple of software developers that can develop your app or your software for your company, that can develop an app for your company. And you don't have to, or there's actually an incredible software development company that's right in Raleigh. And all of these things are possible. It's really just knowing quite kind of where to start to be able to get that development in process, where it's like, what you want. You can describe it. They're going to frame it out kind of, window by window, idea by idea, concept by concept, and then take care of it for you. They can also manage it for you if you don't want to have a couple of developers in-house for you. And I think that it is something that is financially feasible for a lot of people. It's just knowing where to begin and kind of getting your mind out of that concept that we have to have one of these box developers or development companies.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my biggest thing from the tech side. I mean, even listening to Eddie and kind of knowing what they've gone through with their biggest push that they've made this past fall as it relates to their business intelligence and reporting back end. There's so much to consider, and the point he makes about not getting attracted by all of the bells and whistles and that type of thing, and just really thinking about what's core to your business is so important, because I see a lot of people just get completely sidetracked by some new notification that you can push out and
yeah,
that kind of thing. So anyway, what other big takeaways?
The last one was more of, it was Eddie was talking, you brought up turn, which, by the way, it was so funny to me. As soon as you said it, you were like, I didn't prep you guys for this question, so I'm just going to throw this curveball at you. And I was like, good to know you do that to everyone, because I feel like nobody realizes that you really do this to people. When I'm like, I don't think anybody really, they think this is fake or it's a shtick. No, Wes really will just be like, by the way, I'm just going off the cuff and I'm going to throw this question at you that you're completely ill prepared for. Answer it really well, because a lot of people are going to be listening to this. But so I loved that you did that, and it made me laugh. But it was funny because Eddie said, he was like, we put all of this on our facilities team to ensure. Yes, talking about turns. So sorry. So we put this all on our facilities team to trash out the apartment, break down the furniture, rebuild it. And it was funny because the very first thing that came to my mind as soon as he said that was, I was thinking about our last turn together. And I'm sitting there and I was like, and as VP of marketing, definitely not facilities, I'm down there in somebody else's clothes and out until after 2:00 in the morning, building furniture because it was an all-day event.
I was really concerned about where you were going with. You were out at 2:00 in the morning in someone else's clothes, and I was like, "Wait, was she talking about turn?" Or
just realized how that story sounded. Yeah.
So yeah, you went to a property. Think about
how my words sound when I come out of the mouth, and then I never do. I never stop to think about it. I really don't. So yeah, but I thought that was really funny. I was like, nope, definitely no. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You went to a property, not prepared for staying very long, and ended up moving furniture and being a critical point of making sure that the turn actually happened at that property. And I was just had a conversation with somebody the other day, remembering.
That's never weird to me, though.
Yeah. I mean, I packed up to go someplace, for a quick visit during turn, just to, give some emotional support and, kind of inspect what you expect, as we all say. And needless to say, the expectation was not being met. And I had to call my wife and said, yeah, I'm not coming home tomorrow. I will see you in a couple weeks. And so, yeah.
Things didn't turn out quite as I expected. I'm not going to be leaving for a while. I feel like we've all made that phone call, and it's just like, man, really? Yeah. By the way, I just remembered, actually, there was a big takeaway, and I didn't actually, you know what? Hey, Wes, guess what?
You're going to throw me a curveball.
I'm so sorry to do this to you, man, but I'm going to throw you a curveball. Here's something that I completely forgot about, and this was possibly one of the biggest points. So again, hopefully somebody's still here. This was talked about, and it was, Eddie said that he was talking about the accountability of the company. And I loved that. And what it made me think about, because I've brought this to you before, you and I have actually had this conversation before about something that I've always talked about, something that I always end up getting ultimately frustrated with, is the level of accountability that we have and the expectations that we have for our team members, but we don't hold ourselves accountable to. And you've heard me say that too. I mean, I was literally sitting at your desk one time when I looked at you and I was like, really? So we expect our team members to do this, but then how do we do it on the other side? Are we doing the same thing for them? Are we holding ourselves to that same expectation and standard? Or are we just looking at them and saying, this is what you have to do for us, but we're not actually willing to do this for you? And I think that that's a question that everybody always needs to be willing to ask themselves. Are you asking more of your team members than what you are actually providing to them? Or are you just giving them a paycheck and going, what? We pay you to do a job. And you also ask them for loyalty and notice when they quit. And a lot of times you want more than 2 weeks and you ask for a lot of things. And what do you give them in return? And so when he talked about that level of accountability, that level, it's like it goes to respect and professionalism and, tonality, like so many things. It goes across the board with every single aspect of it. And when he said that, I was like, that's possibly one of the most important parts. And I'm so sad I didn't say this sooner, but I'm like, this is possibly one of the most important things that was said this whole time. And I had so much respect for him for bringing that up, because I feel like so many people, especially in a position like his, don't even recognize the level of importance that carries.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to shake your hand for saying that, man.
Yeah. I could create a whole podcast on that.
Oh, for sure.
Not an episode, a whole, podcast.
For sure. Yeah. But like we have 3 minutes. So.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope everybody got something out of that. And I believe that, as I mentioned earlier, I think, when it comes to two companies that have shown steady growth over the past, decade and a half, I think there's a lot to be learned, and both of these guys had a lot to share from that standpoint. So I obviously, I wish we could have gotten into more topics, and I'm sure both of these guys will end up being on the podcast again at some point. So looking forward to those discussions as well. Now's a great time to remind everybody about, speaking of live events, our summits that are coming up, specifically this spring. We've got some that are coming up this summer, or actually in the fall. We'll talk more about that later. But if you are in Chicago or want to attend an event in Chicago, May 26th, 27th, we are actually going to be at what used to be the Sears Tower. It's now known as the Willis Tower in Chicago. We
Sears
are actually... I know, it's Willis Tower, like Sears Tower. Is Sears even still operating these days? I don't know.
Anyway. I genuinely do. No, I have no idea.
So anyway, that's going to be the Midwest. Last year we did the Midwest in Cincinnati. We're going a little further west this time and going to Chicago. So if you are in that area, want to attend a regional summit, you should go to that one.
I think I'm going to go to that one. Oh, hey guys, I'll go to that one.
We've got some really cool things that are coming together for that one. I can't wait to release the schedule for that and who some of the speakers are going to be. And then also in June, I believe it is June 6th. No, it's June 16th and 17th. We're going to be in Phoenix, Arizona for our Western Regional Summit. So if you've been listening to the podcast, if you've been listening to us talk about these summits, again, this is really geared towards on-site and regional level managers and employees within student housing. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of C-suite and executive level, support level positions that attend these as well. And I think there's a lot that you'll get out of it. But that's really what we're creating these summits for, because there's a lot left out there in the conference world to be desired for those particular positions, the regional manager and the site level managers. So, and these are very limited. We are limiting this just to 50 seats. So if you want to go, you need to register early. There's currently a early bird special in place for Chicago. So make sure that you get that. That's the other thing. We're talking about this other thing in New Orleans that I'm not going to cross promote. It was over $1,000 to go to that particular conference. This is $149 if you sign up. I believe it's before I want to say it's before St. Patrick's Day. Actually, I think it's April 1st. So $149. You're just not going to get, I don't know if anything else you're going to get that type of value for as far as a live event is concerned. And so make sure that you're taking advantage of that and showing up at this event. Like I said, we do expect both of these to sell out, as we have limited them to just 50 this year. A lot of reasons behind that. I won't go into it right now, but the main reason is because we wanted to make this something that had a big impact, and it has a bigger impact if we've got less people there, because we're able to talk to people and really get to understand, what kind of issues they're dealing with, how we can better serve them. And when it goes into our workshop on the second day, that really comes out. So we are just limiting this to 50 people. So be aware of that as well. Get it done early, get registration done early. Also, the SHI community, important announcements that are going to be coming up, and you're going to miss out if you're not part of the SHI community. Go to studenthousinginsight.com, go to the upper right-hand corner and click on login, and then it'll just take you through the steps for registering for that. That was a lot.
That was a lot.
I like this episode. So, Greta, as always, thanks for spending some time with us, and good luck to everything this semester. I hope we get to talk to you before the end of the semester, but if not...
What? Me too. It's only February. God.
Well, guys, thanks again, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.
Bye.